Hi guys, welcome to Essential Practice. Rad is here. Our focus with this class is on forward bending. It's a group of poses you can do anytime. Forward bends are great medicine for any time in your life when you feel overwhelmed, when things get too much and you need some quiet. Forward bend helps you to calm down, cool down your nervous system. We will need a few props, 2 blocks, we need strap, we need chair and a couple of pillows and possibly blanket. Before we go into our practice, we will focus on stretching our hamstrings. Lie down on the back and grab your strap. If you don't have a strap, grab your belt. And lie down on your back. Lie down flat. Shoulders are broad, knees are bent, soles of your feet resting on your mat, feet are hip width apart. And extend your right leg straight up. Bend your right knee. And position your strap on the ball of your right foot. Let's start with your right leg and then straighten your right leg. Holding the strap, so both ends of your strap you're holding with your left and right hand. Straighten your knee. Press your shoulders into your mat. Back of your neck is long. Deep breathing. Immediately what happens, you feel the stretch here at the back of your right leg. We've got 3 muscles here, hamstring muscles. There are actually 3 separate muscles. Attached all the way to your pelvis. Those muscles often are very tight. The first thing we're doing, we are lengthening, stretching hamstring muscles. We need them for our forward bending. You can stay here with your strap. You can do alternative. Clasp your hands behind your right thigh and straighten your right leg. Press your thigh into your hands into your thigh, and lower your right outer hip down. Press your right buttock into your mat and straighten your knee more. That would be stage 1. Stage 2, lift your chest, lift your head, and climb up your leg to catch your calf or even your ankle. A little bit more intense stretch. Open your elbows wide apart. Press your lumbar spine into your mat. Pull your belly in and lift your chest and chin. Breathe into your right hamstring. And switch. Second side. Bend your left knee and position strap on top of your left foot, sole of your left foot, and again press your foot into your strap. Straighten your left knee, holding the strap with both hands, and lower your left outer hip down. Press your left buttock into your mat. And take your foot towards your head more. Intensify the stretch. Keep your knee straight. You're very, very tight. That might be it. You might just want to stay here for 5-10 breaths, stretching your left hamstring. Or go again further. Clasp your hands behind your left thigh. Press your thigh into your hands. Hands into your leg. Stage 2, lift up and catch your calf or your ankle. Breathe, 3 breaths. Preparing our body for what's coming. Forward bending require hamstring flexibility. So already we are in the spinal flexion here, hip flexion, and release. Please come up again to your hands and knees. We're going to start in child position. Open your knees wide apart, a little bit wider than your hips. Then bring your big toes touching and sit on your heels. Extend your arms forward and lengthen your spine. Our focus is on how long we can get that extension here. Feel it in the back vertebrae here of the spine, our thoracic spine. Stretching the spine forward, lift your chin, lift your chest, and then bow forward. Take a couple of breaths here. Forward bend, child pose, deep hip flexion, opening your pelvis, releasing your spine. Breathe all the way down to your belly. Back of your ribs, side of your ribs. That's your pose. Anytime you feel tired in your practice, you can rest in child position, balasana. It's a great place to catch up with your breath. Adjust your blood pressure. Great. Please come to your hands and knees. Keep your knees where they are and take them slightly towards each other. Take your hands a little bit wider than your shoulders. Spread your fingers wide apart. Your elbows are straight. And curl your toes under. Start with lifting your sit bones up, up and back. Focus on lengthening your spine. Spinal extension, lengthen, 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 push down through your hands, and then second stage, straighten your knees, legs are straight. Adho Mukha Svanasana, that's the shape. We have sort of a V shape of the body. We're aiming to ground the heels. So immediately you recognize it's your intense hamstring and calf stretch, as well as your spinal muscles stretch. 2 breaths here. Then drop your knees down, come back to your child position, sit on your heels and bow forward. Forward bend again. Lengthen, deepen your breath. Great, so now positioning of the hands. That's very important to establish in Adho Mukha Svanasana. When you place your hands, ultimately what you're looking for, your index fingers pointing forward. There's a slight external rotation in your wrists. Your index fingers pointing forward and they are parallel. Your fingers are spread wide apart. A little bit wider than your shoulders. You have more space. Now, second thing, what's happening in this position when we're doing downward facing dog, very often what happens is that excessive postural tilt in the pelvis. So I've mentioned that at the very beginning when we did the first class. I talk about the curves in the spine. We've got the lumbar, thoracic and cervical. And our goal is to keep that natural flow of energy. Any pose we do, we can look from the perspective of those three curves. So let's look into this situation one more time. Because of the tightness in the hamstrings and tightness in the calves, what happens, there is a lot of postural tilt and rounding in the mid-thoracic and lumbar spine as well. And that's okay, especially at the beginning of your practice. You will have a tightness here and tightness in your hamstring muscles. It might take a bit of time to stretch those muscles. The way to modify, you bend your knees and start with searching for that natural curve here in your lumbar spine, lifting your sit bones. Lift your sit bones up and up more and try to search for that extension in your spine and lumbar curve. You align your ears with your upper arm bones, finding natural curve in your cervical spine as well. Maybe that's your downward facing dog with knees bent. Try to keep that curve in your lumbar spine, finding a bit of more anterior tilt in your pelvis, and then straighten your legs, maintaining that curve if possible, if available. That's the ultimate goal of this pose, to keep the extension and keep the curve in your lumbar spine. The way to modify this, you can practice on your yoga blocks. That's the way to work around that, to lifting the floor a little bit higher. Again, come to your hands and knees, and please come up to downward facing dog. It's a little bit easier. Now again, bend your knees and find the curve in your lumbar spine. Find the curve and lift your sit bones. Take your sit bones up and back. And then the second stage, try to straighten. You might be able to ground your heels down. You might not. That's the journey. It takes a bit of time to stretch those muscles. Adho Mukha Svanasana. Now, if this feels really intense, you can use your chair as well. You can practice to modify this pose with the chair. To do your downward facing dog on top of the chair. Place your hands on top of the chair and again bend your knees. And then bend your knees deeply. Take your sit bones back and breathe in this position. We're going towards the next pose. You're ending up in sort of half forward bend shape using the chair. Ardha Uttanasana, our next pose, half forward bend. Your hands are on top of the chair. It's a beautiful shoulder stretch as well. Press your palms into your chair, lifting your armpits and taking your sit bones back, stretching your spine and stretching your hamstrings. You might need to keep your knees bent to find a little bit of more curvature here in your lumbar spine. So see again, what happens in this position is again that posterior tilt, a rounding in the spine, your hamstring pull down. We want to avoid that. The spine ending up a little bit higher than your sacrum, which is not recommended here. We want to point the pelvis, the sacrum, tip it forward and down. So looking for the curve, the natural curve in your lumbar spine. More of a anterior tilt instead of the posterior tilt. Then maybe straighten your legs if that's available to you. Half forward bend. Beautiful pose. Deep stretch for your spine and for your hamstrings. Grounding your heels down, pull your kneecaps up, intensify the stretch. And then come out the pose. We did half forward bend. Now we're going to go into a full forward bend, which is the intense Uttanasana. Tan is the intense stretch of the legs and the spine. So from the side, again, hands on your hips, standing in mountain position. You hinge forward, bow forward with your spine straight. Bend your knees, start with, and touch the floor. So again, that knee bend in this position, what it does, it allows your pelvis to tip more forward. So more of an anterior tilt in your pelvis. And then bow more in. Fingertips. Now if you can't touch the floor, you can grab your blocks. Knees bend, grab your blocks. And now work towards straightening your legs. Try to straighten your legs. Take your sit bones up towards the sky and ground your heels down, stretching your hamstrings and calves. And bow deeply in. Pull yourself more towards your knees, bringing your chest towards your shins. Your chin is tucked in. Back of your neck is long. Stretching your hamstrings, stretching your spine. Uttanasana. Place your hands again on your hips and come up all the way up to standing. Let's look into different modifications and options. Again, it's all about your tightness here in your hamstrings and also your calf muscle. Great way to modify this pose, especially for beginners, is to keep that deep bend in your knees. It looks like this. Knees are bent and you hinge from your hips. The more you bend your knees, the more you can touch the floor. So you allow your pelvis, the anterior tilt in your pelvis, to be introduced, lifting your sit bones. You can rest your ribs on top of your thighs and stay just here. You can catch the outer edges of your heels, wrap your hands around your heels, calves, and stay in this position. Release your head and breathe, shoulders away from your ears. A deep bend in your knees. That's the way to work around the tightness, lack of flexibility in your hamstrings. Hands on your hips, shoulders back, and again come up all the way up to standing. One more pose, very similar. Prasarita Padottanasana. We're going to need these blocks again. Wide-legged forward bend. Prasarita Padottanasana. Place your hands on your hips. Step your feet wide apart. Make feet parallel. And lift your spine. Lift your heart, spinal extension. Roll your shoulders back. Exhale. Bend forward, hinge from your hips, and rest your hands on top of your blocks, the highest height. Go a little bit wider with your legs. So it's again your forward bend, looking for the straight line in your spine, for the curvature in your lumbar spine. Shoulders back away from your ears. You can keep your knees bent. Notice what happens when you bend your knees. Immediately you introduce more tilt, anterior tilt in your pelvis, searching for the curve in your spine. Now if you have more flexibility, you can fully straighten your legs. That's the stage one. Stage two would be to rest your palms flat on your mat and bow deeply in, trying to bring your head down towards your mat, stretching your spine more and more, stretching your legs more and more. Pull your kneecaps up, ground your heels down, lift your sit bones and bow deeply in. And if you're more flexible, you can rest your forearms on your mat, breathing to the back of your legs, hamstrings, calves. And come up again on tips of your fingers. Strong legs, bend your knees, hands on your hips, and lift up. Heel, toe, your feet back to Tadasana. Back to standing neutral. One more pose. Please sit. Sit with your legs straight. Now, again, if your hamstrings are very tight, you will notice something happening here again in your lumbar spine, the rounding in your lumbar spine. I'm going to grab those blocks, those pillows, and sit on 1, 2, or 3. The higher, the easier. Sitting a little bit higher allows you to introduce more anterior tilt in your pelvis. Place your hands next to your pelvis and roll your shoulders back. Sitting with legs straight, Dandasana. Shoulders back. Lift your heart, looking again for the extension in your spine and the curve in your lumbar spine. The curve in the back of your neck. Now, bending forward again, from your hips, bow forward. And notice what happens here. Immediately the spine wants to roll, rounding the spine. We need our strap. Position your strap outside here, soles of your feet. Grab your strap with your both hands and sit tall. Sit tall, press your feet into a strap, straighten your legs and lift your chest. Roll your shoulders back. Rounding the spine. So walk a little bit forward with your hands and sit right here. Shoulders back, bow forward, and feel again the stretch in your hamstrings, stretch in your spine. Paschimottanasana. Intense stretch of the West. So great, the way to modify this position, again, a deep bend in your knees. It's a great way to start. Now what it allows you, it immediately introduces the anterior tilt in your pelvis and you can reach much further without the strap, or again you can use your strap lift your spine, work on that extension in your spine. That's the priority. Lifting your chest, shoulders back, lengthening the spine, grounding your sit bones, and then bow forward more and more. If you're more flexible, you can catch your big toes. It's the next stage. Lifting again, spine straight forward. Maybe straighten your legs. And the final stage is to allow that rounding, but only if you don't compromise any discomfort here in your sacroiliac joint. Bow forward and take 3 more breaths. Paschimottanasana, intense stretch of the west. I'm going to finish with Shavasana. So we close our class with resting flat, corpse pose. Every yoga class you go to, it will finish with a few breaths of stillness. Allow the breath to be long and deep. Relax your arms, legs, pelvis, shoulders, head. Shavasana, corpse pose. Start becoming aware of your body, lengthen and deepen your breath. Moving your fingers, toes, start bending your knees. Roll to your right side. Use your left hand to press down and come to sitting. Sitting cross-legged position. Sit on your blankets, pillows. Make sure you are comfortable. Reflecting on this journey. Finding quiet in this overly stimulated living. The intensity of our everyday life can get too much. Yoga allows us to slow down, inserting pauses. Bring your palms to your heart. Namaste.